Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
This is KRWG Public Media, TV, radio, online. News that matters. Now, across the Mesilla Valley and the borderland, the stories that shape our community. From the KRWG Broadcast Center at New Mexico State University, this is Newsmakers.
New Mexico ranks between 48th and 50th in animal welfare, according to Animal Advocates for Change. The organization was founded to address the policy side of the problem, including laws to reduce abuse and neglect, increase compliance with existing ordinances, enhance population management, reduce the risk of injury, and more. AAFC co-founders Kathe Stark and Geri Wheelis will discuss their efforts, and we'll hear from Michel Munier, the Executive Director of Action Programs for Animals, who will tell us about the work from a rescue perspective. And Teapot certainly knows what it's like to live in the shelter. He's here to help keep your attention. After all, he's got a face for TV. I adopted Teapot from the Animal Services Center of the Mesilla Valley about 6.5 years ago, and he is a good boy. Animal rescue work is hard no matter where you go in our region. Deming Animal Guardians cares for, vaccinates, spays, and neuters all animals brought into their care prior to rehoming into approved and loving homes.
Deming Animal Guardians is a local nonprofit in Luna County, New Mexico. It's a 501c3 nonprofit. Our mission is to alleviate animal suffering in Luna County and to alleviate pressure on our local humane society, which is always inundated with overpopulation. We primarily work with the community for low-cost spay and neutering. Over the 30 years, we've done well over 16,000 spay and neuters, which if you do the math on that, it's probably hundreds of thousands of animals that have not been born. So that has really helped to alleviate some of the animal control problem. We also help with feeding of animals in low-income homes, microchip programs, vaccination programs, rabies programs, and primarily spay and neuter. We do dogs and cats, kittens and puppies, pregnant moms, and we do a lot of dog training. So if they come in with a particular problem, we want them to really come into a new home properly trained, so we work with the animal and get them trained before they find a new home. Deming Animal Guardians Dagship runs a food bank program. It has cat and dog food, canned food, treats, bones. It's easily accessed by the community, mostly on Wednesdays, but emergencies we can get food to anyone. We do not want you to take your dog to the Humane Society because of lack of food, so we'll always support you and keeping the dog in the home. If the dog is not spayed and neutered, we do require in the future for donations that the dog is spayed and neutered. However, Deming Animal Guardians will provide financial aid certificate to have the dog spayed and neutered, microchipped, and rabies, so that you can access the food bank on a monthly basis. Bob Barker has been really our hero of lately. He provided funds for our office adoption center. It was so successful that we went back to him and asked him again for upgrades on kennels and a solar array. We specifically asked for a solar array because the electric bill can be really large. So instead of fundraising for electric bill, we asked Bob for a solar array, which he granted. Now we have a zero electric bill. So every dollar that comes into our organization goes directly to the animals. Without community support, none of this would exist.
Animal Advocates for Change was co-founded by Geri Wheelis and Kathe Stark with a focus on policy. They join us today to tell us more about their work. Welcome both of you to KRWG.
Thanks, Casey.
Kathe, why don't we start with you? Tell us just a little bit about the founding of the organization.
Well, Geri was on the city's animal care task force that was working on the revision to the city's ordinance. And one of the provisions was including the ability to do trap, neuter, and return of community cats. So when we got to that part, she recruited me because I'm a crazy cat lady. And I got involved heavily. And then when the ordinance was passed, I'm kind of a policy nerd. I went through the ordinance and said, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. It contradicts itself, and it's not following best practices. So we got our heads together and started working.
And what action did you take from that point on, Geri?
We started really delving into best practices around the country of animal advocates and animal rescues, and we started putting together what we felt was a quote-unquote dream ordinance. The term was originated by Clint Thacker, we recruited as many people as we could. You know, we did social media posts, and our friends, we all made them do it. It's kind of been Kathe and I just looking at the framework of the ordinances and filling in the blanks and so forth. And then we got our city councilor involved, and the shelter, and what else? We've kind of escalated from there, and we're trying to get something passed, actually.
What are you hoping to see? I was planning on getting to this later, but since it came up so early in the conversation, what are you hoping to see for the trap, neuter, release program?
To be in effect fully. Now it's partially in effect. It's not for the public portion of it. The rescues and animal control can still bring in trapped cats. Then they are spayed, neuter, and ear tipped and released again. It's our goal to have it be for the public. The shelter started out with that, but the need was just too overwhelming, and they became overwhelmed because no provisions had been made for budgeting or extra surgeries, and they did a phenomenal job with what they had, but they could not maintain the pace of that without the resources.
You know, so many people in our community try to help feral cats. What is the best advice you have for people who find them on their property?
Well, the first piece of advice I would have would be to stop using the term feral, no offense, because a large portion of our free-roaming cats, community cats we call them, aren't feral at all. They're cats that have been abandoned, left outside, that are trying to fend for themselves. So one thing, if you don't want them on your property, if you're one of those people, there are plenty of deterrents, and animal control has deterrents they will lend to a homeowner to try before they purchase. If you're like me, where you want to take care of these cats and be a caretaker, then learn about feeding, learn about trapping. And one of the things that we did as Animal Advocates for Change is we partnered with Broken Promises of the Southwest, and we put on 2 free trap, neuter, and return training sessions, and we hope to do more so that people trap humanely, they know what they're doing, the animal is safe, and the person doing the trapping is safe.
What are some of your other top concerns, Geri?
Our group was formed mainly to implement best practices in animal welfare laws in Las Cruces and Doña Ana County. We started mainly in Las Cruces and kind of morphed into Doña Ana as well, because as you mentioned, we are 48th to 50 consistently in animal welfare in New Mexico, and it has to start with the laws. And so that is our main goal at this point, is to get best practices laws in place here.
I also saw a section on accountability. So obviously that's something that you want to see, worked into the framework. What does accountability look like, Kathe?
Well, one of the things that we did early on is we held a public meeting, and we just invited anybody in the community to come and tell us what their top concerns were. And enforcement and owner accountability rose way to the top. I follow the shelter statistics every single day. And I was looking at February, and from the 1st to the 25th, over 300 stray dogs were brought in by animal control. And everyone was saying, what happens to these dogs? Why aren't these owners being responsible? And one of our concerns too is, how can we help them be more responsible? Do they need education on how to restrain their dog? Because it's out of control with the number of stray animals going into the shelter, and then the euthanasia rate will go up because we can't adopt or transport our way out of the population that we have with dogs and cats.
And I know, Geri, that funding for spay and neuter is a big part of that equation. What would you like to see happen?
I would like to see the city allocate funds for that, for spay neutering, and I would like to see funds allocated to bring in rescues or spay neuter clinics that can handle weekends and do clinics.
You know, no doubt there are a lot of people in the community who want to bring their animals in and have them spayed or neutered. Then there are people who don't want to do that and who, you know, are breeding their animals. I think the term we use is backyard breeders. What do you think the future is for those folks?
Well, if you look at best practices across the country, you start to regulate backyard breeding. Number one, if somebody's going to be breeding, you want to make sure it is done humanely and safely for the animals that are being bred. That there is a genuine concern for the genetic makeup and what happens to these dogs and how they're socialized as puppies. And most municipalities and counties that we look at, you have to have a breeding permit to do that, which enables animal control, number one, to know who's doing the breeding and to check on the conditions in that backyard or wherever they're doing that breeding. That you can't just randomly keep having puppies. There was a situation recently in which we asked animal control to go out because this is like the third litter in a very short period of time. It was freezing cold. They're on the side yard in a small kennel with no floor and no covering. And that's backyard breeding gone horribly wrong. And it's not humane for those puppies. And
with a sign that says $50 each,
right.
You know, selling.
Let's talk about another area where members of our community are struggling, and that's with veterinary care. How does your organization think, where does it play a role in moving forward with affordable, accessible veterinary care?
Well, one of the things we've been working with Animal Companions, and they're working on actively recruiting vets and marketing Las Cruces as an area for vets. We've also talked to some areas in New Mexico where they're bringing in veterinarians on the weekends from Colorado. There's a group from Arizona that will come in and looking into that as a resource. The other thing that we have asked the City Council to do, since they didn't fund TNR at all, is to fund a voucher program that would enable people to travel within the region, not just within Doña Ana County. We have vets in Alamogordo and Deming and in Tier C that are affordable, and people they just need some help. They need a hand up to get their animals there and do right by the animals and get them spayed and neutered. But they can't afford to do it here and they can't access it here.
Your organization, Geri, is relatively new. What kind of progress do you feel that you've made in the maybe couple of years since it was formed?
Probably a year. And it seemed to start out slow for us, but it has kind of ramped up, and I do feel like we've made a lot of progress with getting a working draft of the new ordinances down and having met with our shelter, with the ASCMV, and our city councilor here who is supportive of what we do, and we have a state senator who's supportive of what we do, and we do have many people in our group that are supportive, and it's actually going through the steps that it needs to go through the steps, rather than just dying.
Now, are you looking for members of the community to volunteer with your organization?
Definitely. The more voices, the better. And we're regularly going to city council meetings and just keeping the issue in front of the city council that we're still here. We want to remind you about this topic or that topic having to do with animal care and control. And then when the county adopted their new ordinance, particularly in the area of community cats, I think there were 6 or 7 of us that showed up at the county. And contrary to normal practice in public comment, elected officials rarely respond. And Mr. Macias right away said, we need to meet with you, we want to work with you, and so we've met with them also.
And how do we find you?
On Facebook, Animal Advocates for Change. Send us a message and we'd love to hear from everybody.
Geri Wheelis, Kathe Stark, Animal Advocates for Change, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
Thanks for having us, Casey.
We know how important spaying and neutering is to reduce the population of unwanted and ultimately abused and neglected animals in our communities. SNAP, the Spay Neuter Action Program, is a nonprofit organization that aims to help reduce the number of animals destroyed every year in Doña Ana County.
SNAP, the Spay and Neuter Action Program, is a local nonprofit organization that provides free or low-cost spays and neuters to qualifying low-income households. Our mission is to reduce the pet overpopulation, to reduce the suffering and death of cats and dogs because of the pet overpopulation in Doña Ana County. And this is for those low-income households that could not otherwise afford to pay for those spays and neuters. The free program is through the Doña Ana County contract. It is contingent upon available funding, but you have to live outside city limits of whatever city area or in the rural areas. Now, our program, it covers the cost of the surgery, the anesthesia, and the pain medications if required. Any additional costs that the veterinary might recommend, say e-collar, Elizabethan collar they call it, or vaccinations, that's not covered by the program. Our low-cost spay-neuter program is for those people who live inside the city limits.
Her name is Bumblebelly. I was calling around to all the vets to see how much it would be to get spayed, and they were all way more than I could afford. So whenever I went to the dog park, I saw a flyer and I found out about the SNAP program. It helped me immensely. I couldn't have afforded to get her spayed without that. I see that in my line of work because I'm a groomer. Like an unspayed dog or an unneutered dog, they're so much more aggressive towards other dogs. And when they get spayed, it just calms them down. They're so much less likely to run away, and they just have a lot less behavioral issues. And it doesn't change their personality in any way. I was really worried about her getting pregnant or her getting sick, so that's one of the reasons I really wanted to get her spayed. Every dog that gets spayed or neutered, there's gonna be so many less homeless pets, and that is incredibly important. It cuts down on disease, it cuts down on homelessness of pets, so it's just super important to get your dog spayed or neutered.
We are located at 2405 West Picacho, Suite 103, and we are open Tuesday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Our phone number is 575-524-9265. The website is snapnewmexico.org. You can also find us on Facebook. Our clients are extremely grateful for the help. The vet bills that they would have had to pay otherwise, they simply just could not afford it, which means those pets would not be spayed or neutered.
As long as animals need rescuing, people like our next guest will be there to do what they can. Michel Munier is the Executive Director of Action Programs for Animals and is here to talk about the organization's mission and all the ways they go about achieving it. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Casey. It's good to be here.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit about forming your organization because I know it is a long road.
It is a very long road. I literally formed it in my office at home back in 2009, and it has grown leaps and bounds. So we're struggling with growing pains and also now trying to figure out how it's going to sustain itself and keep going on, you know, beyond me and beyond the people who were at the ground floor in the beginning.
What would you say was like one major key to success?
For us, I believe we were filling a niche. When I first started Action Programs for Animals, I was doing much like our previous guests. I was researching national trends and standards and how things were being done elsewhere, places where we don't have this kind of problem that we do here. And APA was formed to kind of try to model some of that and fill some of the niches and show that you can operate animal rescue that's very friendly with people and very open with people, and that removes some of the barriers for people accessing and adopting your animals. So we do things a little differently.
Tell us about your current adoption center and how that came to be.
Our adoption center is now at 537 North Solano. We used to run out of a beaten, rundown rental. And back about 4 years ago, I lose track of time. Around 2019, we got a bequest from one of our former dog adopters who had passed away and left us her estate. And with that estate, it was like 3 homes that were sold. With all the money that we got from her estate, we were able to purchase the building that we're in now. So it's ours.
Indeed. And you also have a thrift store that funnels funds into your organization. When did you decide that that was a component for the overall group?
We got to a point where we were going to either have to scale back or I think one of the biggest stressors running a nonprofit is always funding, because we don't get funding from the state, from the city, from the county. You have to raise every penny. And we were getting into some lean times where we either had to scale back or find a way to raise more funds for especially the overhead costs. And no matter what, you run a nonprofit, it runs like a small business. And there's always overhead costs, from employees to the utilities, and everything costs more when it's commercial, So it was that, learning how to adjust to grow.
The roof.
The roof, yes, yes. And some things we've learned along the way that we didn't know before, because, none of us are, we're not small business owners before. I work for the federal government. I'm a technical writer, editor. That probably helped us along the way too, because I was able to do a lot of the PR, a lot of the grant writing, a lot of the admin work that comes with also running a rescue. So now I'm hardly ever in the front lines anymore. I'm stuck in the office, but it's just as important, and there's just as much work there too.
So what kind of items are you looking for your thrift store? What kind of things really come in and go out benefiting the organization the most?
I know they look for furniture and housewares and jewelry and clothing, especially women's clothing. We do hope to expand the thrift store too eventually, and not anytime, not next year, but soon, so it can be a little bit bigger and we can carry more items like men's clothing. We're in a really small space right now.
So tell me about some of the programs that fall under action programs for animals that benefit members of the community.
So we started off with the pet food bank. So that was our pilot program. So when we first started out, we weren't even rescuing animals yet. We were outside of Sam's, outside of everywhere we could be, talking about animal advocacy, talking about the issues like your former guests were talking about, with people, just regular people coming out of Sam's. And I decided to start the pet food bank to try to help the people that were relinquishing animals because they were struggling with hardship on that end of things. So that was our pilot program. And then since then, we still run that. It's been going strong all these years. We do low-cost vaccination and microchip clinics in the area. Bi-monthly, we do them at our place. Like everything here, we're at the mercy of veterinarians that are able to do the services or help. We'd probably do more, but the vet we work with, we have to work with what we have.
There is a really serious shortage.
It's a very serious
not just
shortage.
In our community, but around the country. And so what is your advice to pet owners when they're considering getting a pet and then seeking out care?
I think research what there is ahead of time, and we do have an info line. You can call us and we can give you advice, so I don't have to go through everything here, but know what there is and isn't here, and if you can handle the responsibility and the care of the animal before you get them.
I think a lot of people struggle with training, and so the PAWS program is one that might be really exciting for folks.
That's one of the ones that we're most proud of. So with the Southern New Mexico Correctional Facility, we run the Prisoners and Animals Working Towards Success program. We send most of our large dogs that we pull from the shelter there to be trained. They live with their inmate handlers for 2 to 3 months and get trained in house training, obedience, just the basics, just learning how to be a good dog, around people. Because a lot of times we go for, or we rescue, especially the long-term shelter dogs. So they're a little bit, unruly and have been in a kennel for a long time. So this helps them decompress and learn some skills to become good family members.
Now I know that COVID impacted that program for quite some time. Has it?
Everything.
No doubt. Has it gotten back to what you would call normal at this point?
It's gotten back to normal.
And how about the folks that work as trainers in that situation?
So we have an in-house PAWS team. That's new. Best Friends gave us a grant to also build up an in-house, meaning at our adoption center we have our lead trainer there. We have a couple of apprentices, because what was happening is the dogs were coming out of the prison, going back to us, and then losing some of their skills or not getting refreshers. And also our lead trainer goes out to the prison and makes sure that everything is running smoothly over there.
I see. So you heard our conversation earlier with Kathe and Geri. Where are you on those policy initiatives in terms of what you think would help animals the most in our community?
You know, I used to do more advocacy like they're doing now, and I hate to say it, but gave up a little bit. And also working a full-time job and running an organization that was growing, I didn't have as much time for it. We definitely advocate for the same things. Our laws have to change. Our ordinances have never been in line with best practices that work in other areas of the country. We had been pushing for that since 2009. But another area that is the other end of that is the implementation. It's changing our animal control departments to be animal care and control departments. And quite honestly, what we need is for our leaders to find animal welfare to be as important as anything else, to give the funding and the resources that they need, because our animal control departments are literally running with 6 officers sometimes. You need a lot more people, you need a lot more resources, and you need a lot more interagency work together. Because as we know, when we're talking about we're 48th to 50th, it's not just animal welfare, it's child welfare.
Yeah, indeed.
And those things are linked. So when you
Michel Munier, I'm so sorry.
Okay. No,
we are out of time, but I hope to have you back again soon.
Yes, ma'am.
And we could talk about this a lot
Yes.
more. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you so
joining
much.
us today. And that's our time for now. Join us this week on KRWG Radio. Every weekday, it's Morning Edition, 5 to 9, Fresh Air at 11, followed by Here and Now from noon to 2, and All Things Considered from 4 to 7. KRWG News is always online at krwg.org, and we'd like to hear from you. Email us with story ideas and video submissions. The address is feedback@nmsu.edu. For all of us at KRWG News, I'm Casey Counts. Have a great week. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.